Hashtag Zero Trust Security, the future of cybersecurity. Hashtag CyberShield Daily Hook. In 2023, the average cost of a data breach reached $4.45 million, the highest figure ever recorded in the history of cybersecurity. But here is the part that should genuinely stop you cold. Over 80% of those breaches were caused by attackers who already had valid login credentials. They were not breaking down the door. They were walking right through it, with a key that your own security system handed them. In the next 10 minutes, you are going to discover exactly why traditional network security is fundamentally broken, what zero trust architecture actually means beyond the buzzword, and how the organizations that have adopted it are stopping breaches that would have destroyed their competitors. And we will get to the one counterintuitive truth about zero trust that most cybersecurity vendors will never tell you because it directly threatens their business model. Stay with us. Background: to understand zero trust, you first need to understand what it replaced and why that older model was always built on a dangerous assumption. For decades, enterprise cybersecurity operated on what is called the Castellan moat model. The idea was simple. You build a strong perimeter around your network. Firewalls, VPNs, intrusion detection systems. Everything inside the perimeter is trusted. Everything outside is suspicious. If you had valid credentials and you were inside the network, you could move relatively freely. The assumption baked into this entire model was this: if someone is already inside, they must belong there. That assumption made a kind of sense in 1995. Most employees worked from a single office location. Servers sat in physical rooms down the hall. The internet was a novelty, not a primary business tool. The perimeter was clearly defined and genuinely defensible. Then everything changed. Cloud computing dissolved the perimeter. Remote work eliminated it entirely. Mobile devices, third-party contractors, SaaS applications, APIs connecting dozens of external services, all of these punched holes through the castle walls until the castle itself ceased to exist as a meaningful security boundary. The term zero trust was formally coined in 2010 by John Kindervag, a principal analyst at Forrester Research. His insight was both radical and obvious in retrospect. He argued that trust itself was the vulnerability. The moment your security model assumes that any user, device, or network location is inherently trustworthy, you have already lost. Kindervag proposed a new core principle: never trust, always verify. Every single access request, regardless of where it originates, must be authenticated, authorized, and continuously validated. Main content: so what does zero trust actually look like in practice? Because this is where most explanations fall apart into vague platitudes. Zero trust is not a single product you can purchase. It is not a checkbox you tick during an audit. It is an architectural philosophy built on three fundamental pillars. The first pillar is identity verification. In a zero trust environment, identity becomes the new perimeter. Every user, every device, and every application must prove who they are before accessing any resource, and that proof must happen every single time. This means multi-factor authentication is non-negotiable. It means behavioral analytics that flag when a user suddenly starts accessing files they have never touched before. Google implemented a version of this internally called BeyondCorp, beginning around 2014, after a sophisticated attack known as Operation Aurora compromised their systems. By 2017, most Google employees could work securely from any untrusted network without a traditional VPN because the system verified identity continuously rather than trusting network location. The second pillar is least privilege access. Every user and system gets access to exactly what they need, nothing more. A marketing coordinator does not need access to financial databases. A customer service application does not need to reach your HR payroll system. This principle of microsegmentation means that even if an attacker compromises one account or one system, the damage is contained. They cannot move laterally through your environment because the doors between segments are locked and require fresh verification. But here is what nobody talks about when they explain least privilege access. Most organizations discover, when they actually audit their permissions, that they have massive over-permissioning. Employees who left 2 years ago still have active accounts. Contractors have access to systems that were never relevant to their work. A 2023 report from CrowdStrike found that organizations routinely have 3 to 4 times more active credentials than active employees. That is not a technology problem. That is a governance problem. And zero trust forces you to confront it. The third pillar is assume breach. This is the mindset shift that separates zero trust from everything that came before it. You stop asking how do we prevent every intrusion and start asking how do we limit the damage when an intrusion occurs. Because it will occur. The question is whether a breach becomes a minor incident or an existential crisis. Deep dive. Now let us go deeper, because understanding the philosophy is only half the equation. The implementation challenges are where most organizations struggle and where the real lessons live. Consider the federal government of the United States. Following a series of devastating breaches including the SolarWinds attack in 2020, which compromised systems across 18,000 organizations including multiple federal agencies, the Biden administration issued Executive Order 14028 in May 2021. This order mandated that all federal agencies move toward zero trust architecture by the end of fiscal year 2024. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, known as CISA, published a detailed zero trust maturity model to guide that transition. What did the federal experience reveal? That zero trust migration is not a 6-month project. It is a multi-year transformation that touches every corner of an organization. Agencies had to inventory every single application, every user account, every device endpoint. They had to re-architect how data flowed between systems. They had to train staff on entirely new authentication workflows. The technical debt accumulated over decades made this extraordinarily complex. And here is the counterintuitive truth that vendors will not tell you. Zero trust actually increases security complexity before it reduces it. In the short term, you are managing more authentication checkpoints, more policy decisions, more monitoring data than you ever had before. Organizations that underestimate this transition frequently experience what security professionals call alert fatigue. So many security events flag that analysts become overwhelmed and start ignoring them. The discipline required to implement zero trust properly is significant, and organizations that treat it as a product purchase rather than an organizational transformation consistently fail. The technology stack required for mature zero trust implementation typically includes identity and access management platforms, endpoint detection and response tools, cloud access security brokers, software-defined networking, and security information and event management systems, all working in coordination. Microsoft, which completed its own internal zero trust transformation, reported that the process took years and required deep integration across hundreds of internal teams. Analysis. So what does this mean for the real world? What are the actual outcomes for organizations that get zero trust right? The numbers are compelling. According to IBM's 2023 Cost of a Data Breach report, organizations with mature zero trust deployments saved an average of $1.76 million per breach compared to those without zero trust. That is not a marginal improvement. That is a nearly 40% reduction in breach costs. Beyond the financial impact, consider resilience. When ransomware hit Colonial Pipeline in 2021, causing fuel shortages across the American East Coast, investigators found that attackers had used a single compromised VPN password to gain access. A fully implemented zero-trust architecture with mandatory multi-factor authentication and microsegmentation would likely have contained that attack before it spread to operational technology systems. One credential, one breach, 5 days of pipeline shutdown, and roughly $4.4 million paid in ransom. The math on zero trust investment becomes very clear very quickly. Rhetorical question worth sitting with: if your security model can be defeated by one stolen password, is it really security? Or is it the illusion of security? The sectors moving fastest toward zero trust adoption are financial services, healthcare, and government, the three industries with the most valuable data and the most severe regulatory consequences for breaches.